Connection established.
Hey, Force fans, welcome back to the Jedi Force podcast. It's been a couple of weeks, but it's good to be back with you all today as we are excited because we just couldn't wait to tell you about watching Ahsoka.
When the stakes are this high, it takes a master and an apprentice to defeat our enemy.
What makes someone ready?
You just know.
There's so few Jedi left.
Ahsoka, Tano. These days, there are few who can wield the Force. You need my help. There is nothing easy about being a Jedi.
I need backup now!
So last night, we all got together on Zoom and had our TVs going and got to watch Ahsoka all together. I think it was a little bit of a late night for some of you guys. I remember when I was a kid, I got to, skip school one day. My parents allowed me to go see Return of the Jedi. I got up at 6 o'clock early one morning and we rode our bikes down to the theater, stood in line for like 3 hours and got to see Return of the Jedi together. That was one of my funnest experiences as a kid. So last night, we all kind of got together as good as we could over a stream call, and you guys were all hanging out on the floor, eating popcorn. It was just like a movie experience, and I hope you'll remember it all your life. Ahsoka premiered Tuesday night with 2 episodes of the new series, and it's going to be on one episode for the next, I think, about 6 weeks. We have about 6 more episodes every Tuesday evening. So we want to tell you a little bit about what we thought about the show, and excited that Star Wars is, back on the screen. And so let's go ahead and start. In our discussion about Ahsoka today, we're going to kind of go on the assumption that most of you that are watching our program have seen the program, have seen the episodes that are out there. So we are going to be giving some spoilers. And if there's something that we talk about that you don't understand, hey, let us know. It would take a lot of time to give you an entire synopsis of the entire show, but there are a few things that you want to know. Number one, Ahsoka is a character that was created for the Clone Wars, which was the animated series that took place after the Revenge of the Sith, the 3rd movie in the trilogies. So what you have is Ahsoka was the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, who, as we know, eventually became Darth Vader. Through the course of events and through the Clone Wars, certain events happened that caused her to leave the Jedi Order. So even though she began working with the rebels against the Empire, she still has Force abilities, but she does not consider herself a Jedi. And at that time, of course, many of the Jedi had been destroyed through Order 66. So she worked more or less as a spy for the Rebel Alliance and lived through the time period that we see in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, but off doing some other things. We do have accounts where people like Hera, the pilot of the Ghost, the starship from Rebels, and her droid Chopper are present in this particular series, along with Sabine, who was a Mandalorian, and that had been for a time trained by Ahsoka, at least in using a lightsaber. It's kind of questionable right now as to whether or not we think she might have some Force abilities, which I kind of like to think that she probably does. And we're going to see some of that play out in the series. Go ahead.
They kind of hinted towards her having Force abilities.
Yeah. I would like to see a scene maybe toward the end where we're kind of still guessing as to whether or not she has some kind of force abilities. And then maybe she just, in defeating maybe, one of the Inquisitors or something, she reaches out and maybe, grabs the lightsaber from a distance. And we just, automatically know, oh, yeah, there she's starting to hone her skills. So they're hinting about it, but they're also kind of pushing us away from it. Because the droid, Hu Yang, pretty much said, of all the Force users I've seen, you're pretty much the worst.
So that kind of is hinting towards having abilities, but not very good ones.
Maybe. I think you can interpret it either way. Of course, what I just quoted was an exact quote, but that's kind of how I took it.
Nobody but the Inquisitor has red lightsabers. Did you have orange?
Yep.
What's with that?
We talked about that on one of our shows a few weeks back, because when they started, previewing the show with the commercials and teasers, we noticed that it was orange. It was like, is that red? Is that orange?
Aren't there different Jedi lightsaber colors?
Yes. And I think they're always trying to come up with something new. And we don't know the significance of it yet, but in the new Ahsoka series, one of the characters, Balin Skull, I think is his name. Unfortunately, he's the actor Ray Stevenson, who recently passed away. But we'll talk more about that in a future episode. But he has an orange lightsaber. I don't know if it showed up in maybe Attack of the Clones or not, but I don't remember seeing an orange lightsaber before. So a lot of people are speculating, what does that mean? Because the colors of a lightsaber typically indicate, what side of the Force an individual on. Bad guys, always red, Sith, Inquisitors, all that.
Except
But then
General Grievous.
Aren't General Grievous's lightsabers his trophies?
exactly, because he got them from other Jedi. They weren't his own. Of course, he said he was trained by, in the Jedi arts by Count Dooku, who was a Jedi at one time and then turned Sith. But yeah, you could say he stole his lightsabers.
You said you hadn't seen an orange. You haven't seen an orange lightsaber. Orange is a common color. It was the color of the Sentinels in the temple.
Yeah,
because I've seen orange in the video games before, and so that's
video.
just my go-to. That's been my go-to color. You got the green, you got the blue, you got the orange for Jedi, and then Mace Windu is the oddball with the purple.
The idea is that they were former Jedi, but they're not quite what we would consider to be the Inquisitors. They might be help for hire. I think we're going to learn a little bit more about it as time goes on. But I have my own philosophy about the Inquisitor with the red blade. This might blow your mind a little bit. For those that don't know, Ahsoka is kind of on the hunt for, dual purpose, to find Thrawn, who's the heir to the Empire, the great leader. They want to find Grand Admiral Thrawn so they can start their war up again, which we know eventually happens within a 30-year period with the First Order. So there's got to be some kind of tie-in to that. But what we also know is that she's looking for Ezra. Because if any of you are Rebels fans, you know at the end and the finale of Rebels that Ezra used the Purgles, the space whales, to capture Thrawn, and they were both taken out into space, into some hyperlane, and who knows where they went. And that's kind of what the premise of this show is about, beating the enemy to find Thrawn. But at the same time, where's Ezra? What's happened to him? I have a theory. That dude with the red lightsaber, the Inquisitor, I'm wondering, I'm going to go on record right now to say, I wonder if that's Ezra. Now, I don't think he's turned to the dark side.
No.
I think he's there as a spy trying to thwart the plans to find Thrawn. That's my thinking. He fought.
I don't know.
I know it's a stretch. And And I went back and I watched that duel that he had with Ahsoka there on Corellia. And just how he was moving, how he turned around. And of course, she had already put the lightsaber into the HK robot, but he turned around and finished it off. And then, I don't know, there's just one, he got to live. Two, he's always masked. So there's got to be a reveal as to who this guy is.
And usually Inquisitors aren't masked like that.
There's one or two, I think, in
Yeah.
Yeah, they take on various looks, but yeah, most
well,
of them.
in the Tales of the Jedi, when we see the Ahsoka arc, the Inquisitor that she fought there, was he masked? Because he had like a really cool, one of the coolest looking Inquisitors I've seen, but yet he dies so fast. But so I think he was masked. Now, here's a question though, Chris. Just trying to play out your theory here. Pretty cool theory, just on the front of this. But let me throw some rebuttals here.
All right.
What's the point of the map if they're going to this other galaxy? Are they not going to the other galaxy to retrieve Thrawn? And if they're going to the other galaxy to retrieve Thrawn, then isn't Ezra there too? Or did they not actually go to the other galaxy? Which is another question. How could this ancient Night Sisters map be a map to where they are when they were taken, by the space whales just recently?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some questions there that I think need to be answered. But how was your understanding then of the map situation, and how would that play into your Ezra theory?
One, there's no definitive answer yet that's been revealed. It's kind of a plot hole that people are complaining about online. Yeah. How does something that appears to be, what would you say, thousands of years old, point a direction to somewhere where they believe Thrawn might be? Does it have something to do with the hyperspace wells? Does it have something to do with their territory, where they might have gone? Does it have something to do with where some kind of entity might happen? Or is it some kind of prophecy? Maybe it's some kind of, prophetic thing. They've addressed that before in the realm of Star Wars. It's like Anakin was supposed to be a child of prophecy, and that he would bring balance to the Force, which he did for a time, with the destruction of the Emperor, or so we thought. And so for that time, you do have that piece. So, of course, the Dathomir, women are supposed to be what we would call witches or something like that. And I think that there's just a lot of that mystical thinking and in that realm. So it's not something we can easily pinpoint.
So I don't know. I mean, this whole other galaxy business, that's different for a galaxy far, far away.
What you said about Anakin. Balance to the Force doesn't mean that the light side gets all the power.
That's a good point. I mean, even was it Yoda that said in one of the movies that, maybe we misinterpreted the prophecy, which is always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when you think about it, after the events of Luke Skywalker and Vader taking down the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, there was really no dominant force of power, you might say. It was just kind of an even balance, and that's what balance means, but there was peace in the galaxy for a bit. And that's why a lot of people had a lot of problems with the sequel trilogy, because they felt that it undid everything that Anakin accomplished up until Return of the Jedi, which I see their point. But in order to weave everything together, you've got to just kind of compartmentalize the fact that, the prophecy for him and the fulfillment of that was for that particular period of time, as the Jedi are famous for saying from a certain point of view.
The Ahsoka's droid, he's actually in Clone Wars,
Yeah.
the show. He helps the Padawans build their lightsabers, and I think it was season 2 or 3 or something.
Mhm.
And I really liked that episode. I think it was about like the kids or the Padawans.
But he's a droid. You expect us to learn from a droid?
Who said that? Many years I have been on this ship, teaching many a Jedi before you, and I will continue teaching many a Jedi after you. Call me what you want, but inside my memory banks, I contain a record of every lightsaber ever made, and the Jedi who fashioned them. Which will you choose?
As soon as I
Yeah.
saw him, like, what?
Yeah, he's thousands of years old. He's helped generations of Padawans, like you said, building their lightsabers, instructing them as to how.
The construction and overall design are executed exactly the way I taught younglings to build a lightsaber.
Voiced by David Tennant. Do you guys know who David Tennant is? You might not be familiar with a series called Doctor Who. It's a British series. It's been around since the 60s, and they kind of revamped it in the 2000s. And David Tennant was one of the most popular Doctor Who's in modern times.
Now,
So-
here's where they might know him. Have any of you guys watched the new rendition of DuckTales?
No, not yet. I'm
Not yet.
planning on soon, but haven't yet.
But he voices Scrooge McDuck in the new show. So
Well, Nick,
If
you
y'all
and I
see-
watched the new version of Around the World in 80 Days. Did your kids get to see
Yes.
that?
no, I
Okay.
think there's some elements in there I probably would want them to not see, but
Yeah, he starred in
Um,
that as Phineas Fogg.
mhm.
Maylee, what do you have?
Why did Ahsoka not want Sabine's help?
Well, they got a little history there that we aren't entirely sure of at this moment. Of course, we've seen the first 2 episodes, and they've hinted a lot at that maybe they just had kind of a falling out, that Sabine's a little stubborn, a little hard-headed. But I think the truth of the matter is that Ahsoka has gone through some various stages where she's been disappointed, in the missions that she's had to carry out, which is one of the reasons why she left the Jedi Order, because she was falsely accused. But what I think you find in their relationship is that Sabine is a little high-strung, hard-headed, which you got the character clashing. But I also think that it was probably a matter of her protecting Sabine too, that she didn't want to see her get hurt, with the work that she had to do.
You know what I'm wondering? What's that girl who was in jail and at the very beginning?
Okay, that goes back to an episode of The Mandalorian in season 2, when we first met Ahsoka in a live action. So the Mando shows up on this planet, and he helps Ahsoka fight against this woman. Her name is Morgan Elsbeth. We don't really know who she is at that time or what her purpose was. We just know that she had a connection to Thrawn, because that's why Ahsoka was there. Now, if you remember, if you saw that episode, the Mando goes there because he's on a mission to find a Jedi, for Grogu. And of course, Ahsoka leads him to the Rock, which eventually leads him to Luke Skywalker. But Ahsoka, as we've pointed out, doesn't claim to be a Jedi, but she is after Thrawn. And she knows that Morgan knows something about that. So what we didn't realize until we watched the first episode of Ahsoka is that Morgan Elsbeth is a descendant of the witches of Dathomir.
Now, back in Mando, though, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this, because watching the Ahsoka series, you could tell the way her eyes look and then her hair color that, yeah, she's probably a witch of Dathomir. But I didn't get that impression when we watched her for the first time in the Mando series. And so I'm wondering if it was there or if this was something that they added later. But of course, the lighting was very different back
Yeah.
in the Mando, so that might keep it more concealed. But I wonder if the seeds were planted there, and then also with her name being Morgan and being a witch, I've heard that she's supposed to be a reference back to the old King Arthur legends with King Arthur's sister Morgan Le Fay. But that's kind of an interesting, just little.
Yeah. At the end of that episode of Mandalorian, yeah, she was captured. She was the one that had the Beskar spear, and that eventually Mando took. And then at the same time, she was taken into custody, with the New Republic. So here she's being transported on the ship, and it's your typical, help the bad guy escape kind of thing, which that scene was crazy intense. And it shows a little bit of the arrogance of the New Republic and their confidence in the fact that here you've got Balin Skull and his apprentice showing up, pretending to be Jedi, and the captain being like, no, you're not a Jedi, blah, blah, blah. And of course, unfortunately causes destruction for everyone.
It looked very clean to me. Every time we saw the ships, when we saw the harbors or the docks, stations and whatnot, everything looked so clean. Costumes looked clean. Everything looked clean. It looked a little too artificial. And I was certainly taken aback by it just a little bit. But then I started thinking, but this is the New Republic. They are cleaning things up, and it's a facade, right? It's a facade. Well, look how clean we are. Look how great we are. But in reality, they're as fragile as ever. And so there is this hope that you see in the cleanliness of everything, but underlying it all is a very fragile system. And so that was some of the observations I had watching the Republic scenes, like when they were in that ship, when they arrived and everything.
Remember these new Republic ships that, in fact, they addressed it in the series last night when they said, this was one of our new starships, and it was a cool starship. I really like it. It had a lot of modern features to it. Yeah, it was very clean. It was new, but going back to something that you said, a lot of the parts and inner workings of those starships were based on the old Imperial equipment. That's what we learned when we went to Corellia. And we see that they are tearing out the old engines of the old Star Destroyers, and they're using that equipment to build their new starships. So in a way, there's just some symbolism there. I don't know whether that was intended or not, but there's some symbolism there in what you said, and seeing just how these ships are being put together. But they couldn't do it without the technology of the old Imperial. That's why there was so much vagueness, when they went into the command center there, and you see the red protocol droids. I mean, everything that, when you see red droid, what does that automatically represent? For the most part. I mean, in Andor, there was a red droid. He was the good guy, but you've got the officers in the background, always kind of their eyes darting around, and they were in red.
Right. Little Easter egg there. Remember in the sequel trilogy, C-3PO has a red arm.
I know, right? I almost didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
You probably don't recognize me because of the red arm.
Well, now we know where these red arms come from. They come from these droids on Corellia.
Well, actually, they have a comic out that tells why 3PO got that red arm. And there was a droid that he was stranded with, and there was a little droid adventure, and this droid had sacrificed himself for the group and gave 3PO his arm, because 3PO's arm was ripped off.
Excellent.
I love the music in Ahsoka.
Oh yeah. So Kevin Kiner did the soundtrack for Ahsoka. He's the same one that pretty much did all of Clone Wars and Rebels. he really has an ear for bringing us a kind of a new take on an old feel. I noticed in Ahsoka, I didn't hear a lot of the original type themes. I heard things that kind of led into them. So he's definitely doing his own thing, but boy, it has the original Star Wars feel.
Now, Collie, you had an opinion about some of the music in the show last night. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. The rock music when Sabine was riding her speeder was, I would say, inappropriate for Star Wars.
I
I've heard some
personally
others
liked
feel
it.
the same thing.
Yeah, I personally like the rock music. Which
I liked it too.
I liked it, and I will say that, you know, stuff like that has been used throughout the series, so it's not foreign to Star Wars. The Clone Wars had some music like that. Of course, then you had some other that were a little bit more on the campy side, like the stuff in Jabba's palace, and then the stuff in the and here's something else. When we talked about changes in Star Wars in our last episode, in Jabba's palace and Return of the Jedi, the soundtracks that you guys hear today were not the original soundtracks. There were different songs back in my day when I saw it originally, and on the original albums, like a song called Lopchi Neck. And then you have in, what was it, Force Awakens, you had that, what we call reggae type music, a reggae beat called Jabba Flow. Kevin Kiner came up with some really cool themes. There's one that I really like called Salvage Ship, and it had a really neat rocking theme. Not hard rock, kind of like what we heard with Sabine. But so yeah, you've got some stuff like that scattered throughout Star Wars. So I was cool with it. Plus, they did it in a different language.
Yeah, and you got the jazz of the Cantina band, right?
Oh,
That's
I have
jazz.
that. Some guy, and you can't get the original version of it, but some guy on YouTube actually did a complete song of Max Rebo's band in the cantina there in Boba Fett. Boba Fett. And it is a jazzed up version of the original Cantina band song. So yeah, I listen to those themes a lot in my car. You know, guys, on the last Jedi Force podcast that we did, we actually talked about the fact that we would do an episode about music. So I want us to table all these thoughts that we're having about the music, and let's just do a full-blown episode the next time we get together. So back to Ahsoka. Bentley, share some thoughts.
I like it so far. I think it's going to be a good show.
Yeah. I'm glad that it seemed to be. Now, yes, there's fighting, there's lightsabers, there's, you know, people getting blasted and all. I'm just going to say the word kid friendly, just from the standpoint that I think that it's been, you know, we took a chance last night watching it together. Normally, especially what Nick and I try to do, and, you know, your parents as well, is that we try to view these things before we show them to you, just to be sure that they're decent for not only you, but for us as well. But so there are some things that, you know, we wouldn't recommend, especially for our listening audience. Now, most people in the world really don't care about these things, but, you know, we're Christian folks, and we try to, you know, do things in what we consider to be a more godly way. We know this is fantasy. We know this isn't real. When we talk about the Force or witches and things like that, that's all just part of the fantasy. But we want to be sure there's not any bad language. I didn't hear one word in Ahsoka that concerned me at all. Did you guys hear anything? I didn't see any scenes that you know, that would bother me to show anyone. So I thought it was done real decent, and so I kind of had that expectation going in, and that's why we could all watch it together. And, you know, we'll see how it all plays out in the episodes to come.
Let's go back to the droid that Ahsoka has, this Hu Yang. droid. Now I know there's a history already established, and of course I don't want to take anything from David Tennant. He's just phenomenal, especially as a voice actor. But did anybody else get the opinion that he was trying to be too much like K2SO?
That's exactly what I was thinking, which I'm cool with. But what was interesting about it is he kept it pretty straight during most of the conversations, but then he would throw in this little bit of sass, at the end or something like that. Almost like, fine, I'll go back to the ship, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I loved it. I love the K2SO vibes.
I was actually missing K2SO. I was having memories of him getting shot saying, climb. What were you saying, Kali?
Well, talking about the blood, in episode 4, I saw something that I couldn't quite place until I remembered something I read. You never see blood in a lightsaber wound, do you?
Actually, you do.
There's one time.
And I've seen it in some other stuff too.
And that's in episode 4, right?
Well, yeah. In the cantina there, where Obi-Wan takes his saber and cuts off the arm of
yeah,
I'm forgetting
when
the
I
name
saw
of
that, I saw blood pooling on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm like, I thought that's not what I've ever seen before.
Yeah, hard to explain that. I guess if we were to think real world about it, we're thinking, or in universe about it, we're thinking that a saber cut would cauterize. But I guess when you're going so quick with stuff like that, I guess not. Just because we've seen
the original
scenes.
Star Wars is the first time that George Lucas was telling the story. So there was,
well, even in the new series, I mean, laser blasts have produced blood. So I don't really understand the scientific concept behind it or why that's the case. Bentley?
Well, my thinking on that, while we don't see blood all the time, is because of because the lightsaber is basically fire that's controlled, that's not shooting far away. Because there's got to be something holding the lightsaber from just expanding. So, especially like when you, so when you steam like or get a knife hot or something like that, and then like you cut yourself, it's going to take a second to bleed because of the heat. Am I making sense?
Well, I think I know what you're trying to say, even though I've never actually seen that done.
Are you trying to say that when you cut through somebody with a lightsaber, it kind of seals off the blood veins?
Yeah.
That's what you would think. But we see the evidence where that's just not the case in every case, that is. Okay, and spoiler alert, we know that Sabine was stabbed through with a lightsaber. And when she inserted that into her abdomen, it stayed there for a little bit. And when she pulled it out, it all seemed to be cauterized. I don't recall seeing, there was a wound there.
She recovered pretty fast too.
Yeah. So it didn't obviously hit any vital organs, which makes you wonder, was that apprentice trying to save her at the same time? Again, there's just all this weird stuff. It's like I'm trying to read a little too much into it.
Well, Balin at the end, he had that comment of remorse, that it's a shame that she's the last Jedi, that there's so few left. It's there's more to the story about Balin and his apprentice, and of course we were wondering earlier what her name was. Her name is Shin Hati or Hattie.
Shin. Okay, that's the thing about some of these characters, these Inquisitors, things like that. We know that formerly many of them were Jedi, which they were quote unquote good at one time. And they did that with Reva in Obi-Wan Kenobi. in that series. And what we wanted to see, and we didn't think we'd see it because she was pretty bad up front, but what we wanted to see was redemption. And I think we want to see that in guys like Baylan Skoll. I just don't know how they can't go there, because that's what we want. We don't want him to end up the baddie. We want him to be redeemed somehow. So I think that they're just trying to play on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why we like him, even though he's the bad guy. He's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, I think once your hair turns gray, you might be able to cosplay him.
I was thinking about artificially coloring my hair gray so I could already.
You could pull it off. You could do it. We've got a comic convention to go to in October, so
yeah.
On Jawa Junction, we just like to run around like a couple of Jawas and say, "Look at what we have. Look at what we'd like to sell you." What have you guys run across here lately that you want to share with us? It's kind of like our little Jedi Force podcast show and tell. Maylee, what you got?
Chewie.
I love it.
This is my uncle's.
Now he's animatronic, right? Oh, his lips are moving. That is really neat. I've seen a lot of Chewbacca's, but I haven't seen one like that. All right.
He makes sounds.
Yeah, but Zoom cuts it out.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard that. That's how I yawn.
His eyes are so scary.
That's fun.
One of the things I love about Chewbacca, especially when Peter Mayhew was playing him, you could just, you could look into his eyes. They did such a good job with the makeup, especially with how, you could see the actor's eyes. And of course, Junis, Sumato. I don't remember how to pronounce his last name. He's the one that's playing Chewbacca, these days in the sequel trilogy and Solo and all that. But he did a fantastic job. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. And I think he really studied, the walk and the mannerisms of Peter Mayhew. What else we got?
My dad bought this for me at Target the other day. It's the Obi-Wan Star fighter.
Nice.
So here's Obi-Wan.
Hello there.
You can change his face to when he gets to the ship, he has like that little communicator thing.
Okay.
And then he has a hoodie.
Ah.
So this is
the
R4.
droid R4.
Yeah.
So this is the one he flew around in the Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Geonosis and.
So this is the R4 head, but he goes on this little thing that's like moves around.
Okay.
But you can actually store his body inside the ship when you're not using.
Wow, that's a cool idea. I love that.
I have the Anakin Starfighter, but that's in storage. So.
Okay. Oh, we'll see that in a future show then.
Yep.
So one of my latest additions then is something I've been wanting since I was a kid. And they're finally starting to put out some things that are a little bit more affordable. And this is part of the mission fleet, micro galaxy mission fleet. And this is, of course, your typical Lambda shuttle. And
whoa.
Chris, give it to me.
Huh?
Please give it to me.
I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, that looks
Chris.
so cool.
Yeah.
Have you always had that Chopper figurine on your top shelf?
That's R4, actually.
That's actually R5D4.
R5D4. I was wrong.
Yeah. And speaking of Chopper, we didn't talk about Chopper being in Ahsoka. We're going to have to do that. That's cool. let me take a look here. Yeah, I think I've showed this to you before. You know, R5D4 first showed up there at the droid cell through the Jawa Junction. And Uncle Owen bought the droid, or was attempted to buy the droid, and he, blew
And
his top.
explode.
He blew a motivator. And that's how R2 came to be in possession, or Luke came to be in possession of R2. And the story goes, and I'm not going to get into the Force stuff. There was some weird comics about R5D4, but the story goes that R2 had revealed to R5 what his mission was, to deliver the message to Obi-Wan about Leia needing help. So the story goes is that as R5 is walking off with Luke, that he blows his motivator on purpose. And so what we find out, and that's never really confirmed, but we know that R5 was brought back for the Mandalorian series. Pelimoto owns him, and eventually he starts working with Mando a bit, and we find out a little bit about his backstory. He did end up working with the Rebel Alliance, and we know that he did play a greater importance rather than just being what we thought for 40 years was just this junk droid that, couldn't hold his motivator. So, yeah, R5 is I love the fact that they're giving him a bit of a better history. This was actually from a collection from the 1990s. So this thing's probably about 30 years old. They did, and the details on it are great. They did a good job, even back then. So I've always liked R5. I have the smaller R5 D4 from the original 3.5-inch collection, 3/4-inch collection. That was one of the very first action figures that I ever had in my Star Wars collection. So he's around somewhere, but he's wore out. And one of the things that happened was I was given him for my 11th birthday. And on that cake, there was a couple of stormtroopers, R5D4, and the cake had red icing on it, not over the whole thing, just piping around the side. And that red got onto my figures, the stormtroopers and R5D4. And to this day, they still have a little hint of pink on them. So you could say I had the first original pink stormtroopers. I got a story for everything.
I want to see that helmet.
Which one?
Which one?
I got Vader here.
The one on our left.
The Boba Fett?
You're right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. It's actually not a full-blown helmet. It's actually a wall ornament. It's called a deco art. I put a picture frame so it can sit on a shelf. You hang it on a wall, but from the front, it looks like a full helmet.
Put Captain Solo in the cargo bay.
Can we see your Darth Vader mask,
Sure.
Chris?
Is it like the Boba Fett one?
No, it's actually a full-blown mask.
Ooh, can you put it on?
No, probably not.
I can't right now because I've got it on display, and I put a screw through the top to hold it together for display, but I can take it out when I use it. I use it for Halloween and different things like that. And it has some of the voice activation. I don't have a battery in it because I don't like to store batteries too long. But yeah, what I do is I have a glass door at the front of my house and a long hallway that goes back to the kitchen. So when kids come to the door for Halloween trick or treat, I start at the end of the hall and I turn the lights out, and then I ignite my lightsaber and I walk down the hall. And unfortunately, what I find out is that kids tend to cry more than laugh. So I have to be careful with the little ones. So usually I open the door, I take my helmet off, and I have to apologize for scaring the little kids. So yeah, it works great with the older kids. And parents want to take pictures and stuff. So that's what I typically do.
You do not know the power of the dark hallway.
what's really cool is when you got the lightsaber ignited and you're walking down the hallway, it reflects in the mask. Another little tidbit of information, little trivia, is that in the newer stuff, whenever a lightsaber is ignited, you can see its reflection all over the place. In the original series, because they had to add so many of the effects afterwards, if you watch, say, Vader fighting Obi-Wan, Luke fighting Vader on Bespin, Cloud City, there's no reflection in Vader's helmet when he ignites his lightsaber. You can't see it. And so that's just kind of funny. Kali, ever since you joined us on the Jedi Force podcast, you've been kind of our rogue rebel agent, our rebel spy. I understand that you found some important plans. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And
so, when Rogue One transmit the Death Star plans, we created another holographic copy of it, and we keep that and some other things in this case.
Wow, that is cool looking. Oh, wow. The Rebel Files.
There are some Rebel secrets in here.
Ooh. Okay, everybody close your ears. We don't need to know.
And so, also in here, like I said, there are the Death Star plans.
Nice.
Get up to the camera.
Whoa.
Very cool.
There you go.
Wow.
The
That looks just, it's also got Death Star 2. You know, many
and you
Bothans
can
lost their
switch
lives.
it around to see which one you're dealing with.
Well, there's a lot more we could say about Ahsoka. So join us each week as we talk a little bit more about the episodes as they progress, and we'll reveal a little bit more. I got to talk about Chopper sometime. And so we're going to have a lot of fun with this series over the next few weeks. And so next time on Jedi Force Podcast, we're going to talk about some of the music of Star Wars. We hope you'll join us for that. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of your favorite tunes that put you in that Star Wars mood. Hey, it's good being with all you guys, and Force fans, come back next time for the Jedi Force Podcast.